When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. I hadn't done much of the healing yet. So at that time, we were just calling the class Advanced Past Life Regression. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. Because that's really what it is. It's quantum. It's so big and so important. So we called it QHHT because it's way beyond past life regression. And that's where the name is stuck now. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years. I encourage anyone interested in quantum healing hypnosis to please take advantage of the training that is now available online. You can find it through my website, dolorescannon.com. Erich Von Daniken, you know, he's kind of like the father of the ancient astronaut theory from way back when he began. And you got some other titles too, don't you? Those are the two main ones, I think. And I call Giorgio the real Indiana Jones. He's the real guy because he goes to all these places, the Sphinx and the pyramids and in Peru and all of these ancient places and the crystal skulls. He's investigated it all. So you're a man after my own heart. I want to see it. I want to know it's real. That's what he wants to know. He wants to investigate and find these things. So he's the real Indiana Jones, the adventurer, the explorer, the investigator. So it's a big honor to have Giorgio here tonight. Welcome, Giorgio.
Thank you very much, Lois. Thank you. All right. You're waiting for that. All right. It's on. Wow. First of all, thank you so much for coming out to see me on a Saturday night in this dry county. I am sure you're all having a really good time drinking if you wouldn't be here right now. But without any, introductions and whatever, I would like to get into this right away because I have quite a few pictures to show you guys, and also I'm really looking forward to answering some questions afterwards. So why don't we just get started with, there we go. Okay, so essentially the question is, what is mankind? And mankind is this species of creatures that sets themselves apart from the animal kingdom, where the one thing that is absolutely different from us than to any other animal in the world is that we have this trait of curiosity. And yes, the cat is curious, but not really. So what I'm referring to is the sense for exploration that we have. And the sense of exploration is that, in the Middle Ages, when people said that the earth is flat, there were still people who boarded their sail ships, and they sailed due west and due east, and they said, okay, if that's really true, that the world is flat, then let's go and find out about it. Let's go to the precipice and see where that water flows, because maybe there's something beyond it. And sure enough, we found out that the earth is not flat, and so without this risk factor, this exploratory trait that we have in our society, we would have never discovered, or not discovered, but explored the world. And so we are a species of explorers. That's what makes us human, that we're always wondering what's out there. And after everything on Earth has been discovered or explored, well, you know, the next frontier will be possibly the bottoms of the oceans. But in my opinion, I think before we explore the bottoms of the oceans, we'll go to outer space, or we'll do both or at the same time. So right now, we are building the ISS, the International Space Station, and it's, you know, almost finished, but not really. But then after that, what we will do is, you know, we'll replace the space shuttle with some type of another spacecraft, and right now we can. This is one of the models of the ideas that the Bush administration and now apparently the Obama administration have picked up upon again. That these are concepts of the rockets that will bring us back to the moon. And if you look at it, it's basically you know, the Apollo program on steroids. Because if you look here, you have the Saturn V rocket, you have the space shuttle, and then you have these new rockets right over here. And if you look at the capsule up here, I mean, it's the exact same concept, just way, way bigger. And one of the tidbits that I find very fascinating is that the whole computer capacity of the entire Saturn V rocket back in the 60s and 70s was about as much as we have today in our wristwatches. This here is millions of times more powerful than all the computer circuits and computer capacity of the Saturn V rocket. And they went to the moon with this. I mean, it's fairly scary. So, you know, and if you consider these things, that how far we've come along, and then we're essentially, you know, building a Saturn V rocket again on steroids, then I wonder, you know, where's the progress? What happened here? Why don't we have any more sophisticated quote-unquote spaceships? But that's a whole different lecture. So eventually we will go back to the moon. We'll start small. We'll build you know, bases, and then from the moon, as we'll build bigger and more ambitious habitats, we will then eventually go to Mars. And just like we'll go to the moon starting out very small, we'll go to Mars starting out very small until we build habitats, until we, you know, have a base up there. And then the logical continuation from this particular destination will be to explore other places in our solar system and beyond. And let's just say hypothetically that 500 years or 1,000 years down the future, we will, you know, go into outer space, and it just so happens that we come across a planet that hosts intelligent life. But that intelligent life happens to be primitive, technologically speaking, not intellectually speaking. So if we encounter that culture or that species, what will we do? Will we just stand back and watch them from afar? Or will we actually teach them a few things? And the answer is, we will do both. Of course, we will first observe, possibly learn their language, possibly learn their ways, their ideas, and, you know, just the way their interactions. But ultimately, see, this is why I need my laptop up here, because I have to keep looking up there to see what's on the screen. And if I had my laptop here, so you have to excuse me if this seems a bit bundled here, but I can see the next slide if I had my laptop right here. And, you know, there's 300 slides coming up, and I don't know them all by heart, so you have to apologize. So I guess now with this picture, now that I know what is on the screen, You know, the skeptics, they keep on saying the reason why it's impossible for ancient astronauts to have ever been here or to go, to go from star to star is because the distances between the stars are way too vast. It's huge distances. And you know what? That is 100% correct. However, in the 60s and 70s, already NASA came up with plans that they referred to as generational starships. And they look, and don't switch it over, please, either, because then when I look up, I'm confused again. So, thank you. So these are these giant wheels that essentially, they turn on their own axis. And what happens is if you do that, you essentially, and on the inside, it kind of looks like this, where you can have entire habitats inside these wheels with regular gravity, because if these wheels turn on their own axis by centrifugal forces, everything is pushed out to the edges or to the outsides of those wheels, thus creating artificial gravity. So you can use these wheels in order to travel through space through a very long, over very long amounts of time. And the wonderful thing about that is the fact that a mathematician in 1983 or 84, he calculated that with something like this, where one generational starship arrives at the destination planet. And by the way, the reason why they're called generational starships is because the first crew that boards that starship will die on board, but they will procreate on board as well. And so it's the third, fourth, or even fifth, heck, even the 20th generation that will eventually arrive at some type of a destination planet. And the destination planet is not some, crapshoot, obviously. I mean, it's definitely, today with NASA and all different space agencies finding out Earth-like planets and things like that, I mean, it's all very exciting. So we will know exactly where to go ultimately. And so this one guy calculated that if one spaceship arrives on the destination planet, and there we will build another one, and so then 2 go out, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16. Through the snowball effect or the reciprocity effect, you can conceivably colonize the entire galaxy in 6.4 million years. Now, 6.4 million years, that's, as we all know, that's a crap load of time. But in the time of the universe or our galaxy, it's a blip. It's absolutely nothing. So the whole idea that extraterrestrials cannot visit us right here has gone out the window, because if we have the technology, and I'm saying that we do have the technology for this, what we don't have is the will or politicians who want to put up the money for this. We do have the technology, because something like this, we have the resources, we can do it, it's just a matter of doing. So if and when we arrive on a destination planet, then we will eventually make contact, providing that planet hosts some type of intelligent life. And so this is where I left off earlier. If we were to make contact, of course we're not going to go and intervene or interfere with them right away, or show ourselves, but we'll observe them for a little while. But then, after a while, we will definitely make contact and teach them in astronomy, teach them in agriculture and engineering and medicine and all sorts of different scientific branches and topics. And so, after a while, we will decide to, okay, we've done our thing here, let's move on to some other planet, because, again, remind ourselves, we are a species of explorers. So we're nomads. All of us have moved multiple times in our lifetime, because after a while, it just becomes boring and you need something new in your life and you move on. And so that's what our whole species is all about, to move on, to explore new worlds and go further. And so we will disappear, essentially, with the one promise that one day we might return. And of course, at that time when we're there, the planet's population, they are completely in awe of us because we have just descended from the sky. We have just showed them how to make fire out of nothing. And we had the capacity of flight because we descended from the sky in spaceships. However, so the thing is that what I'm suggesting is that we eventually will become ancient astronauts on their planet in their future, 1,000 or 2,000 years in their future. Our once very physical visit will have been relegated or will be relegated into the realm of fantasy, into the realm of mythologies and legends, where we were really there. But those stories that they wrote down 2,000 years ago, our ancestors, they were all crazy. They were all nuts and drunk, and they were hopped up on dope and sitting around a campfire imagining stories. That's what happens on that planet, and that is exactly what is happening on our planet. And so, one perfect example that we have is what's referred to as a cargo cult. And I want you, when you get home tonight or tomorrow, Google that term, look it up. It's called cargo cult, like a cargo and then cult. And essentially, what that means is the definition of a cargo cult is if a technologically primitive society comes in contact with a technologically advanced society, the technologically primitive society ultimately will start to worship the technologically advanced society. And mind you, in the past 20 seconds that I spoke, I never said intellectually primitive. I only said technologically primitive. And therein lies the big difference, because our ancestors were as intelligent as we are today. They had the exact same brain capacity, the same brain volume, and I'm talking in the last, 10, 15,000 years. I'm not talking 250,000 years ago where everything changed. So, if we had the potential of time travel, or the capacity of time travel, if we could go back in time, let's say 1,000 years, and we pick up one person and bring them back to present day 2011, that person, we could teach that person how to drive a car, how to build a TV, how to even fly a jumbo jet with proper training. It's not like that person's brain is incapable of doing that. It's just a proper training. So therein lies the big difference. So the thing is that our ancestors, the only difference was that their technological frame of reference was different than ours today. And in the cargo cult phenomenon, which, by the way, is not something that I came up with, but it's an anthropological term that's been accepted or is used in universities all around the world, a cargo cult proves that point. Because in the Second World War, when the U.S. joined, not joined, but went into the war, they had to set up bases in the South Pacific. And so, for the very first time in a very long time, or ever actually, these cultures made contact with other societies. And so, in the case of the South Pacific, especially in the islands around Wewak and Vanuatu and all those places, when the Americans first showed up, the natives were scared to death and they fled. They were hiding behind the bushes, and it took a very long time for them to gain the American soldiers' trust. But after they did so, it was a wonderful experience, because not only did the natives come back out and show them the ways of the islands and things like that, but the Americans also gave them food and cans of corned beef and chewing gum and all sorts of different things, and it was incredible. It was wonderful for everyone. And then, of course, the war ended, and the Americans disappeared as fast as they appeared. And so fast forward about 15 years, and these professors at a university here in the Midwest, they asked themselves a question, I wonder whatever happened to those islanders on the South Pacific that, have been visited by the Americans during the war. And they said, well, no easier way to find out than to actually go there. So they mounted this expedition, and they went there, and they were in complete shock, because what they had encountered was that on the same airstrips where the Americans had their airplanes, the natives had built planes made out of wood and straw. And the ethnologists asked, what the heck are you doing? What is this? Because every night they would sit at the runways, and they would have, fires mimicking the landing lights and things like that. And they would talk into little, wooden boxes mimicking walkie-talkies and things like that. And they would have guns strapped to their, or rifles strapped to their backs. So made out of wood, of course. And the ethnologists said, well, tell us more about this. And they're like, well, we're worshiping our gods, and we want them to return. And in fact, they had the letters USA tattooed on their shoulders and also on their backs. And I want you to go look this up. It's this particular example is called the John Frum cult. And that's just John, how you would spell John, and then F-R-U-M, John Frum cult. And this John Frum cult is a legitimate cult that still exists today, where American soldiers are still worshipped as gods, not as much anymore today as back in the day, because now the islanders know that these Americans were never from another planet or from the sky, but they were, from another country, from another land, another continent. And so the reason why it's called the John Frum cult is because whenever the Americans would introduce themselves to the islanders back in the day, they would say, hi, I'm John from so-and-so. Hi, I'm John from Nevada. Or I'm Mike from so-and-so. But John is one of the most popular names in this country, so that is why it's the John Frum cult. And so, and back then, the islanders truly thought that the Americans were gods, that they were these divine beings that had access to these magical powers that enabled them to fly around in in birds made out of metal. The previous slide that I have right here, if you look closely, and this is not from the same area, this is a little bit later, but that right here is a sacrificed pig, because the native population was so afraid when that plane came in that they sacrificed a pig on the bow of this plane every single night in order to placate the angry bird, because they never had seen or heard a plane rise up into the sky. And as we all know, prop planes, of course, jets of course also, but even prop planes, it's a fairly loud affair, especially when they take off and when they land or taxi. So this right here is cargo cult behavior. And what I'm suggesting with the ancient astronaut theory is the fact that if a cargo cult can happen in the 1940s, and there are multiple other examples since, then my question is, or what I'm proposing, is why couldn't that have happened 10,000 years ago here on Earth? And it really did. And this is what we're about to explore tonight. And now one of the first countries that I always like to talk about is India, because right there, India is a treasure trove of truly amazing, not just paintings as we can see right here, but also stories and carvings that are absolutely similar to Star Wars or Star Trek. Because in India, we have these things that are flying up in the sky, and they're all often referred to as vimanas. And a vimana, the translation for it is a chariot of the gods, or some type of a flying machine. So all over India, there are concise stories, very detailed stories of flying machines that were used in the past, not only by the gods or the demigods, But sometimes human beings were invited to take flight or to take part in some of these flights. And the technology behind these machines was absolutely extraordinary because they were described to have had these amazing capabilities of, for example, they had cloaking devices where they could make themselves invisible, or they could be in two places at the same time. And then it was told that in order to fly these things, you had to have gone through some special training that was provided by the gods and things like this. So they're very concise stories that we can read about. And by the way, what's truly fascinating to me is that the word viman still today in the Hindi language means airplane. So here we are 5,000 years later, and the meaning of the word has not changed at all. But of course, in the past, when they talked about flying machines, our ancestors were all idiots, and they invented all those stories. They were just sitting around a campfire, like I said before, getting drunk and fantasizing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, to me is an insult in the face of our ancestors. Because we have to remind ourselves of one thing, that back in the day, the most important thing for them was to seek shelter and to find food. So to suggest that any of these stories that they told us about, or that we can read about today, that they told themselves or just kept for posterity, that all of these stories are nothing else but fantasy, that's the insult. It's not the insult to suggest that they might have had contact with extraterrestrials. It's that we today as a society say that we are the smartest, we're the pinnacle of creation, and there's nothing greater, nothing better than us out there. And not just out there, but even in our previous societies that have existed on planet Earth. So this, for example, here is a painting or a rendering of one of those potential vimanas. And what's also very interesting in India is that they're very clear in their stories, like the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gitas and the Rig Vedas and all the Vedic texts, that there were these 3 gigantic cities that were orbiting the Earth. And, they were at war. And oftentimes, they would see how these vimanas would fight in the air. They would have these huge aerial battles, and anyone that has read parts or portions of the Mahabharata has to agree that some of these stories, they read like science fiction. I mean, they read like Star Wars with, flaming arrows that are being thrown across the sky, and, weapons of mass destruction, so almost very reminiscent to, nuclear bombs being deployed and things like that, where people afterwards are described to, lose their hair and, lose their fingernails or have boils on their skin. Now, there's only one thing that happens, would be the cause for this to happen, and that is nuclear fallout, radioactive fallout. I mean, we are now reading today in Japan people losing their hair and having boils on their skin and things like that. And why? Because they're right next to the Fukushima plant and things like this. So, what we try to do here is we try to, draw this correlation between modern stories and stories or mythologies of the past and see if there's a connection. And there are connections left and right. People just decide to essentially look the other way. Except, of course, for the enlightened group right here. So, all around the world, it doesn't matter what ancient culture you look at, and now, of course, we have a picture of, Native American Kachina dolls floating up in the sky. I mean, even Native American myths, I mean, they don't even hide the fact that they say that all life originated on Earth from the star people, it was the star people who seeded planet Earth, that all the building blocks for life were imported from outer space by extraterrestrials in the remote past. And, we live in very exciting times right now because geneticists today are facing a huge dilemma, because sooner or later they will have to come out and say that, yes, something doesn't make sense. I mean, they're already saying it now, but it's hush-hush. And so, these are very cool times that we live in, because it all corroborates, the work that Erich Von Daniken has done in Dolores since the 1960s and 70s. So it's been a long road, as you know, but, we're getting there. And so, Native American myth talk about these kachinas that have appeared or have visited our ancestors, and they specifically were known to be physical entities. Many people today think that they were described as spiritual or ethereal beings, and that is correct. However, if you go back to earlier Native American records that were written down by other people later, it always says that the kachinas, back in the day, were physical beings, and that they descended from the sky in these flying shields. Something, that this is a drawing that I've found, that these shields that look like UFOs were the craft with which, they arrived. And if you look at these kachina dolls, I mean, especially with something like this, where is the animal? Because, there are kachina dolls that look like a dog, or they look very animal-like, or a bird and things like that. But then we have stuff like this, or like that, where, I see more something that's extraterrestrial, like a spacesuit or something like that. And so if we move on and explore the whole idea of a spacesuit, this here is in the Amazon of Brazil. It's where the Kayapo tribe lives, and each year they have a wonderful festival called the Bepkororoti Festival, and this actually is Bepkororoti. And the story goes that a long time ago, this flying shield descended from the sky, this glowing orb thing, it opened up, and this being walked out. And he didn't say much. All he did, apparently, according to the oral traditions of the Kayapo Indians, all he did is he walked around and he was humming to himself, and he was laughing a lot. And on the third day, the people got a bit more, frisky, and they, wanted to tip him over, and Bepkororoti got quite annoyed. So he lifted up his staff, pointed at a tree, and he incinerated the tree, thus showing the tribe who's boss. On the fifth day, as if that doesn't sound familiar enough, he all of a sudden spoke their language. Now, how is such a thing possible? Well, we do it every day. You want to learn Italian, you buy yourself a DVD of Berlitz or Pimsleur or whatever all those Rosetta Stone programs are called, and it'll take you 5 days or something like that to have a rudimentary knowledge of a language. Ethnologists do it every day. That is what is so amazing to me when the skeptics say, well, so how come if extraterrestrials show up, how come they know English? Why am I talking to you? Why am I understanding you? My native language is not English. I still understand what you're saying. Why? Because I learned another language. And everyone can do this, including the extraterrestrial. So language never was and never will be a barrier. I mean, it's just a ludicrous argument to suggest that, there's no way that communication between extraterrestrials and people could have ever happened because of the language barrier. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. So, another thing is that, the guy, wore this suit, and he never ate even after he spoke the language. And the reason, when they asked him, why don't you want to eat? He said, well, because I come from a different place. And so the story behind it is that Bepkororoti not only taught these people in different things. I mean, he apparently also, according to their traditions, built their first school, and they gave him, or he gave them, astronomical knowledge, similar to what happened with the Dogon in Africa. Similar stuff happened here in the Amazon. But of course, this is all nonsense. And now, look at the comparison. I mean, you see, that's another thing that the skeptics, or that I'm approached with sometimes. It's because the next few slides will be these beings that are not only up in the clouds, but they're also these statues of these very bizarre, what to me look like beings in some type of hazmat or a spacesuit. If you look at the goggles and the collars that are hermetically sealed and things like this, and in here you can see how there's definitely a glass window for an eye, and there is a person behind it. It's a complete suit. You've got fire or breath that's coming out of here, and then there is this tube that goes to a tank back here. And people say, well, this is just a mask. Well, my question is, where did the idea for a mask even come from? See, that's the first question that we should ask. Where did the idea for the mask come from? And yes, I know that, we want to look like animals and things like this, but all of a sudden, we have these other very bizarre looking carvings that we can find all around the world, and drawings. This is at a monastery in Yugoslavia. I mean, this is very clear. It's a person sitting inside a shooting star. Well, was it really a shooting star, or is it some type of a spacecraft? And so all over the world, we can find these very interesting carvings or statues, figurines of something very extraterrestrial looking. And of course, and that's what I wanted to say, that the skeptics say, well, why would extraterrestrials need spacesuits anyway? Are they as, technologically inferior or primitive as we are? And what a dumb question is that, or what a dumb statement, because when was the last time any of us, or even the astronauts, went to outer space or to the moon without a spacesuit? To suggest that extraterrestrials can just, travel through space naked, in my opinion, is nonsense. And if we subscribe to the idea of, harmful bacteria and things like this, you bet yourself that, of course, they would come here on Earth, revealing themselves wearing some type of a protective suit. Because if our bacteria, not if, but it is possible that our bacteria are harmful to their own being, to their constitution, to their whole, essence. So of course they would wear some type of a suit. And here we have the evidence. I mean, this is in Copan, Honduras, where you have these incredibly tall statues, all made of a solid block of stone. And this one right here, to me, looks very technical or technological in nature. Right next to it, and of course, what the critics are saying is that, oh, no, this person is just wearing some ceremonial garb with feathers and things like that. And you know what? I totally give you that, just not with this particular example or any of the other example that I showed you, because yes, there are statues that show people wearing ceremonial garb. There are statues where, with big headdresses full of feathers and things like that. There's absolutely no question about that. But right next to those statues, we have something that looks like this, where you have these very bizarre chest packs in most cases, and these angled arms that, are manipulating some controls on the front of the chest there. And mind you, none of these statues, none of these figurines were manufactured or carved by ETs. They were all made by our ancestors. But they were made after our ancestors either, number one, saw something, or number two, they were told a story about some bizarre creatures descending from the sky, and that is what they might have looked like. So if we have something like this that looks technological, but it's not 100% technological, it's because a human artist made this. Human artisans carved these statues. But there are examples where there is just no further explanation needed. Such as, can we go back or no? Yes. Such as this one. And even better, this is from Central America, Maya land. Or this one. I mean, I don't see an insect right here, or a fish. And then here, before I go talk about this one, I want you to look at this one right here. This is also from Central America, actually from Mexico, Veracruz region. And it's basically one of my most favorite statues or carvings or figurines that I've ever found. I mean, look at the guy wearing some type of a skull cap. You've got 6 wings that he has, some type of a chest pack with tubes that are going out right here. His feet or his legs are inside what clearly looks like some type of a suit. Now, any of you from the East Coast, this is in New York City at the Museum of Natural History in the Maya or Central America department, and it's on display. And if you go there this summer, check it out. The little plaque underneath it says, God of Textiles. Now, right underneath it, it says, nothing is further known. And now I applaud whoever wrote that plaque that at least they didn't give us any additional garbage besides God of Textiles. Because what the heck does any of this have to do with textiles? Nothing. Okay? And, you know, you can clearly see that the guy is wearing a skull cap, and as if it's not even more obvious, that is a black man found in Mexico, in the Veracruz region of the Olmec heads, all of which have black features. Nobody in mainstream archaeology admits that black people were in Mexico way before we gave them credit for. And not only did they come here, but they didn't come here on boats. They flew. Now go tell that to your history professor. I mean, if you look at the Olmec heads, they're all African features. Yet mainstream archaeology, they say that the Olmec culture was nothing else but people sitting around a campfire, getting drunk, and then they just basically hammered out or constructed or manufactured these giant heads because that is what came to them in their dream. What is easier to suggest? That there was contact between cultures way before we are comfortable in accepting, or to say that, you know, it was all coincidence, that they carved something that they didn't even know existed on the other side of the world. But I want to go back to this statue right here. And what we have here is one of the earliest reproductions of the Indian god Ganesh. Now, everyone today knows Ganesh, one of the most famous Indian gods out there, with, you know, the big fat belly and the elephant head and the big ears, and of course the elephant trunk that comes down. And, you know, he's the god of finance or prosperity. So if you have a Ganesh in your house, you will become a multimillionaire overnight and things like that. But I want you to look at this. which, like I said, is one of the earliest representations of Ganesh. And if you look closely, what you have here is this guy that has a very odd-looking face, some type of panels up here, and he's holding an axe. And I want you to pay close attention to this. And of course, this little canister right here. Now, because this is one of the earliest representations of Ganesh, I need you to think about this from a logical perspective, that this here existed before the idea or the image of Ganesh that we have today. Does this look like an elephant to you? No, because yes, there are some type of panels on his helmet or his hair, but this is most certainly not an elephant trunk, but it's some type of a breathing apparatus. And that, over time, got turned into an elephant's trunk. And thus, a simple extraterrestrial got turned into a fat elephant. I would be pissed if that would have happened to me. No, so this is what we have to do. We have to always go to the earlier or earliest source material, origin material that we can have access to. And the fact that this guy right here has, this breathing apparatus right here with this trunk, I mean, that's significant. And of course, some skeptic will say, yeah, but that's coincidence because that's in India and only over there and nowhere else. Well, I've got news for you, because right here we are in Tikal in Guatemala, and in the museum there is a stele which is about this tall, and I want you to pay close attention to this one, because if you look at the guy's arms, not only are they at an angle, but he's got these mittens that he wears, these very bizarre cuffs right here, and then there is this thing that comes down into a canister on the side, right here. And then look at the guy's boots. I mean, this is absolutely spectacular. I don't see any feathers. I don't see any tutus. I just see some type of technology that was misunderstood, carved by a quote-unquote ordinary human artist. I mean, look at this at the bottom here. These tubes coming out of his boots and all this gear that he's wearing. I think I have, yes. This is actual footage of that guy. And the only thing that's missing, unfortunately, is the guy's head, because it was broken off at the top. So it would have been really interesting to see, if the guy wore a helmet or something like that. But it's extraordinary. So two sides of the world, we have beings with some type of a trunk that goes, or a tube that goes into a canister. Now, just so you know, and I always like to regale my audience with what the mainstream likes to think, the scientists. In scientific or in the academic literature, this thing right here is referred to as the spine of that being right here. Now, I don't know if we have any chiropractors in this room, but if this is your patient, or if this were your patient, you'd be rich for life. You'd be set for life. Because I've been told that if somebody has a spine like this, they'll be walking like this at all times. And so, the nonsense just has to stop. That's all I have to say, that, where is the spine? Because look at the detail, look at the wonderful craftsmanship to suggest that our ancestors didn't know how to carve a proper spine, that is an insult to our ancestors. Because they were accomplished craftsmen. They were accomplished artists. So to say that this artist, he just wanted to, throw us for a loop here by creating a spine like this so that eventually, we could have conferences like this is absolutely ridiculous. And that's what they're suggesting. That, all right, this was just some dude, some artist that decided, oh yeah, let's, wait. Boots with tubes coming out of it. I mean, the guy didn't live in 1986 when everybody wore crazy clothes, but, this is old. So moving on. Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you, I think I've discovered the secret why the entire Maya civilization disappeared, or why they just died out. Because I think they all died of a heart attack while climbing their stairs. This here is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. This is one of my favorite topics in the entire ancient astronaut field, and it's these funerary objects that have been found in South America, in Colombia, especially in the Tolima region of Colombia. And thousands and thousands of these small gold objects have been found inside tombs. And out of these thousands that, by the way, they look like fish and frogs and insects and birds and stuff like this, they found about 12, a dozen objects that look like this. And in 1998, two German engineers, one by the name of Dr. Algen Einboom, he's not an engineer, sorry, he's a dentist, he's a doctor, and then his colleague is an engineer, Peter Belting. They are hobby model plane builders with, they built their own planes, they put propellers inside, and they go out on the weekends and fly them about. They decided that they were going to build a model plane of this. And here are some of the different models that we can find. And of course, this one is the most famous one because, these features do not exist in nature. Because what we have here is not only do we have a delta-shaped wing formation, but the wing formation is at the bottom. It's what's considered in aviation, it's called a low-wing airplane. And the reason why it's called low wing is because it's at the bottom of the fuselage. And so right there, if any of you are ever approached by anyone who says, oh yeah, I've seen this pin on George's lapel, or I've seen this and it looks like a fish or it looks like a bird, you can tell them, no, it doesn't, because in nature, all birds, insects, doesn't matter what animal or what insect, the wings are always attached to where we have our arms attached. And that's the shoulder girdle, which means up. That here is a low formation. That does not exist in nature anywhere. That's point number one. Point number two is the fact that no birds have vertical tail fins. They're all horizontal. No fish, doesn't exist, has stabilizers like this. So, and see, here's the thing, that there are little funerary objects, or not few, but thousands that have been found that do look like frogs, that do look like insects and birds and all these other creatures. But there are these few that look like airplanes. And you could argue that, yes, this one does kind of look like a crocodile, and I have no problem in admitting this. However, we have to remind ourselves that this was created by human hands. This was not crafted by E.T. the extraterrestrial. And so now there's an entire collection of all of them that have been found. I want you to pay close attention to this one. And by the way, Ivan T. Sanderson in the 60s, he actually tested these, these funeral objects inside wind tunnels, and they had perfect aerodynamic properties. And so that is why Dr. Imboom and Peter Belting decided to make models out of these things. And in the next couple of slides, this is the finished product right here that he built. And that's the other one. And so there's a propeller right here at the front. And there's also, and in this one right here, the propeller is actually inside, meaning it mimics a jet engine, because the moment you have a propeller inside, you draw in the air from the outside through a hole. Well, that mimics essentially a jet engine. So what happened, and like I said before, the propeller here is on the front. That's Dr. Imboom, Peter Belting. These are the two. And here you can see the actual propeller right in here. Our good friend Erich Von Daniken with the originals, or replicas of the originals. And there it is in flight. Not only do we see it here in flight, but because of the arrangement of the tail fin in the back and the horizontal stabilizers, or the rudder, this plane was able to do the most incredible aerobatics maneuvers, loops and rolls and just, crazy stuff, very aerodynamically sound. And they also, were able to land safely and things like this. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen the one episode on UFO hunters where they basically just carved one of these planes out of styrofoam, and then they put it on a ramp with a rubber band, pulled back the rubber band with the plane or the gold flyer, set the gold flyer, released it, it flew up in the air. And of course, the way they were cutting it and the way they set up the music, it basically made you think that this thing is going to crash. And sure enough, the plane went up, and it's a styrofoam model. It was about this big, exact same replica. See, what they did with this thing is they basically took the funerary object and they just blew it up to about this size. Meaning, they didn't remove an inch, they didn't add an inch. They just blew it up to ratio, thus stating or proving that, even the little things, they were based on some type of thing that they actually, our ancestors, witnessed. So, when on the History Channel, on the UFO Hunters program, when they released the plane, the styrofoam one, it flew up in the air, stopped kind of it peaked, and then it started to fly down, and it really looked like it was going to crash because it went nose down. And right before it was about to crash, it did what every airplane that lands normally does. It flares, and it sets down with the wheels or with the back portion first, and it lands on its own cushion of air. And of course, a skeptic on the show, he was like, and I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that. These are all truly amazing achievements, or not achievements, but objects that are a direct link to our past. Okay. We're going to go to one of my favorite places in the world. We're going to go to Bolivia, Pumapunku, actually. But before we do that, I just want to tell you guys that, one of the big things in the whole ancient astronaut theory is that when people say, oh yeah, you're one of these people who says that our ancestors couldn't do anything, that they were all just aided by extraterrestrials, and they were dumb, and they didn't have any human ingenuity, and things like that. And that's simply not true, because of course our ancestors knew very well how to cut stone, for example. And here is a perfect example. This is in Greece, and you can tell, or you can see, that this stone here obviously has been cut. And in fact, you can see the tool marks or the saw marks where this stone was cut. Here and here, you see the blade or whatever they used intersecting. Now, the problem is that what we have here is very soft stone. And yes, this is in Greece, but I could care less about this because it's not very ancient and it's soft rock. I really don't care about cutting limestone because anyone in here can cut limestone with their little nail on their pinky. What I'm interested in is this. Here we are in the highlands of the Andes in Bolivia, on the border between Bolivia and Peru, right next to Lake Titicaca, which is the highest navigable lake in the world. It's absolutely beautiful. It's situated at a very high altitude, about 12,500 feet. So the air up there is very rarefied. You gotta go and walk really slowly, otherwise you'll keel over. And there we have there's a world-famous site called Tiwanaku. And Tiwanaku every day is visited by at least 100 tourists. And it's gorgeous. It's wonderful. It has these magnificent gates that are, made out of solid pieces of granite and things like that. But they have dozens and dozens of carvings on them and glyphs that have been translated. Well, not really, but people are working on it. But only 150, 200 yards away, we have another field of ruins. That's this right here, which is Pumapunku. And at Tiwanaku, which is only 200 yards away, like I said, you've got lots of carvings and statues and glyphs that will yield eventually some type of message. But at Pumapunku, you have absolutely nothing except for some of the biggest stones that have ever been assembled in our history of this planet. And the one thing that really is fascinating to me is that the stone that's used up there is granite. And we have the family of granite with igneous rocks, so they have diorite, andesite, really, really hard stone. The only stone that is harder than granite or diorite that I just mentioned, andesite, is quartzite and diamond. Today, in our mills, we use diamond-tipped drills and diamond-tipped saws in order to cut our, kitchen countertops. And here we have these incredible, incredible platforms that some weigh over 800 metric tons they're just laying about up in 12,500 feet altitude, where we still don't know how this ever fit together. And these platforms, they're massive. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this. When I showed this, and I'm sure some of you have seen this in one of the Ancient Aliens programs, but when I showed this photo here to a real-life stonemason, his name is Roger Hopkins. He lives in Palm Springs. He has his own quarry there. He cuts stone for a living every single day. I showed him this, and I said, okay, what would it take for you to recreate something like that? And he looked at it and he said, not for any amount of money or time would he ever volunteer to even attempt to recreate this. He pretty much said it can't be done unless you have very sophisticated computer technology. And of course, our ancestors, according to the mainstream archaeologists, they did this with chicken bones and with string. I mean, look at this wonderful, wonderful curve right here. The deviation between what the round cut that has been made here and the round cut over here is 0. Both sides are identical. Today we can only do this with machines. This thing was not polished. And what is this? You have this block that's just standing around with a perfect groove going down, and every few centimeters you have a hole that has been drilled inside with a chicken bone, obviously, into a diorite block where if you were to use your thumb and go down this groove and apply just a little bit of pressure, you will cut yourself. And I'm speaking from experience. I have cut myself on that groove right here. Now, I don't know, has anyone in here been to Pumapunku, by the way? Raise your hand. Hardcore. I like that. Good stuff. So you know that, these stones, they look kind of weathered. They're very old, obviously, but they look weathered, meaning that you would think they're all very, rough to touch, that they're rough to the touch, but they're not. In fact, most of the stones, especially the ones that are worked, like this one, if you touch it, it's as if you were to touch a bathroom mirror. That is how smooth the surfaces are of these rocks, which means that at some point, in all likelihood, they've been exposed to a process called vitrification. And vitrification is something that we still use today in stone quarries and that builders use, where what you can do is you can liquefy a piece of rock by heating it up to its magma state, like at the volcano, and then pour it into a prefabricated or into a pre-made negative, and you leave it in there, or a mold, and you leave it in there overnight or it doesn't matter. And after that, the stone, if you wait, it hardens back into the shape of that mold. And that is what we have at Pumapunku, because we have something that's referred to as the H blocks. And I love these guys, because about 7 of these H blocks have been found not in this arrangement. That's just, archaeologists who have found them and put them in that row, but that's not how they were found. But these H blocks, this here is the front, this here is the back, and this here is a diagram of one of the first measurements that were taken from these H blocks from 1917. It's on some of the next few slides, of some of the first people that went up there with, measuring devices and things like that. So, look at the sophistication of these blocks. See, you see it like this, it's extraordinary. But if you see it like that, it's like, yeah, whatever, kind of. Even though it's still extraordinary, but if you look at the detail of all these corners, and each and every one of these blocks does not have a single centimeter or millimeter of deviation, meaning they're all identical, which could only have been done if they were machined. This was not done with a chicken bone. This was not done with a leather cloth and polishing. Not even over a period of 100,000 years. Because that's always the big argument of the skeptics. Well, they had time. Guess what? They didn't. Because they were looking for food, they were looking for shelter. And yeah, in my free time, I'm going to build this? I don't think so. So what's really cool about this is that when we fed these things into the computer, this is a very retro 1990s computer thing, one of the first ones that we did. They fit together like Lego blocks, and they built this amazing, almost impenetrable wall. This is another block that was also found at Pumapunku. I want you to look at this conical hole that has been drilled or worked into the block. Look at this corner right here, all these inboxes. And then what is this part right here? Why is there a round cut out portion of that rock? Look at this one. I mean, these are absolutely insane pieces that have absolutely nothing to do with rituals, with any type of worship, or being infatuated with a flower. So, I mean, what is this? For what? Now, if you ask the local population there, they're still alive, the Aymara Indians, and they're these wonderful, wonderful people who, I'm sure you've seen them. They are the ones who have built these boats made out of reed and straw that are absolutely magnificent, and they're floating about Lake Titicaca, and you can actually stay on those boats as a hotel, and it's really something that I would urge you to do. It's absolutely great. Now, if you ask them, because they're very adamant about their oral traditions, when you ask them, well, so who built this Pumapunku? What went on there? They will say, well, you know, we pretty much stumbled upon Pumapunku the way it is back in the day, meaning in ruins, meaning, yes, even when we got there, this place already was in ruins. Because the mainstream archaeologists are saying that it was the Aymara Indians who built this place. And when you ask the Aymara Indians, did you guys build this? They will say to you, no, it wasn't us. We came to this place, and this place already lay in ruins. And when you then ask, well, if it wasn't you, who built it? And without any hesitation, they will point to the sky and say, los dioses, the gods. Yet mainstream archaeology says that what the Aymara Indians are saying, that they didn't build this, they're wrong. Now, who is insulting whom here? And it has nothing to do with human ingenuity. It really has to do with capacity, because we today, and let me just show this one more time, we today pretty much cannot replicate this. And by the way, it says down here, 8,400 kilograms, that's 8.4 metric tons. So that's a big, big car. Actually, it's more cars. A car is like 1.5 tons, so it's like 10 cars. The weight of 10 cars or something like this. I mean, one way or the other, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely insane, because this is diorite, and it cannot be worked with chicken bones. And of course, you know, another thing is the whole idea that all of this was transported with wooden rollers and things like that. Well, if you remind yourself what I just said, we're at 12,500 feet, which means we're way above the natural tree line. After a certain altitude, trees no longer grow. The higher you go up, the more inhospitable it becomes. There are no trees here. There never were any trees here. So to suggest what some archaeologists are doing, that this entire area was, suffered deforestation, don't listen. I mean, listen and then laugh. That's another very interesting piece that is in Cusco, just like that. It's called El Tesoro, or the safe deposit box by the locals. And it sure looks like some type of a, vault. But what was it used for, or what's the origin of it? Who knows? The perfect Inca walls, or actually pre-Inca walls, let's keep that straight, in Cusco, where you can't put a dollar bill in between the fittings. Look at this one. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 corners. And this was all just done arbitrarily? I mean, you can't have, does anybody work in construction here? Raise your hand. Okay. You can't be on a construction site and say like, hey, Johnny, I just need this stone that fits right into here. Oh, yeah, let me here. Throw it over. This requires planning. This is deliberate. This is not coincidence. When I asked some archaeologists, because by the way, similar walls not only exist in Cusco, but also in Greece, on Easter Island, in Egypt, and we'll see this later, all around the world, and they're all identical walls. And when I asked some archaeologists, well, how come they built like this? They say, oh, well, because it was the easiest. Why does that person have a degree? This is easy? No, it's mind-boggling. So you can see, by the way, there's no binding agent in between these rocks, so but they fit together perfectly where you can't put a blade, as you can see, but also you can't put in a dollar bill in between these blocks. And then here, this is in Kenco, also in Peru, where it seems as if the entire side of this wall has been sheared off like with a butter knife. Also here, this all looks very rough, especially the parts that have been cut. Obviously, this is, natural up here, but the parts that have been cut, if you were to, this is in Sacsayhuaman, if you were to go touch this with your hand, it's as smooth as a bathroom mirror. Again, to show you this, and then I show you the stuff from ancient Greece, this is not what I'm interested in, because this is not granite, this is not diorite. So the question is, how was it done? Did some type of sophisticated machining or machinery, was it used? And not only am I saying yes, but I'm going to prove it to you. Here we are in Ollantaytambo, the back entrance of Ollantaytambo in Peru. All the tourists, they go out the front entrance. So when you go there this summer or next summer, actually go in the winter because it's their summertime in winter. So when you go to Ollantaytambo, make sure you ask to go in the back entrance and, to look at this stuff right here. Because in the back entrance, it looks as if you have a type of a quarry here. And it really is a quarry because, these stones were cut out. Now, I want you to look at this very closely because what we have here is a physical impossibility, because it's very easy, quote unquote very easy, to cut out the top block right here, because essentially what you would have to do, even with technology that we have today, you would lower a blade here, you would lower a blade at the bottom, you would lower a blade on the right-hand side, and then you would lower a blade on the back to release the block. Now, look at the bottom one. Do you see how there is no access point from the top to the bottom, meaning that this bridge is completely intact? Okay, so we cut here, here, and here. And then what? And as if they knew that one day we would be puzzled by all of this, they said, let's make it really fun, and put the block right next to it. This thing right here was in there. There is not a single millimeter of material loss anywhere. Okay, so this had to have, required some type of sophisticated technology. And if you're going to ask me what it was, I'm telling you right now, so don't ask the question later, please. I have no idea what it was. All I know is that some type of machinery was used, because I'm about to show you evidence for the machinery. In this same area, there is a walkway, not a walkway, but it's kind of like this switchback that you can go up the side of the mountain. You can't suffer from vertigo or anything like this, because as you go higher, you start down here, you go up the steps, then you go this way over here, and you come over this way. And then at some point, the ledge becomes so narrow that you pretty much have to press yourself against a wall and do this, and your toes, they're like in midair. And then you go higher, and you come to a place like this, where this section of the bedrock, or the face of the mountain, was cut out in a round fashion. And this is at the bottom. This is down here. If you were to step up here and look down between your feet, or towards your feet on the ground, that is what you see. That is a machining signature. That is not spiritual power. That is not a chicken bone. That is not frozen water. It's machines that were used. Some type of blades, some type of lasers. Who the heck knows? But this is a machining signature. Now, especially if you look that some of these blades go into the rock, or into the part that was cut out. In Egypt, and I'm just going to forward this because I would like to answer some questions. In Egypt, we also have machining signatures in rock, where nobody looks at these things and they say, well, it's just there. Yes, exactly. It's there. Look at it. This is the Osirion in Egypt, these magnificent giant stones that if you were to stand right here, you would barely reach to this area right here. And that these are massive, massive pieces of granite. This is not limestone that, most of the other items in Egypt have been built with. This is granite. This here is in Greece, where this perfect cone-shaped temple, not temple, but it's a treasury apparently, was built with perfect acoustics, if you look at this lintel stone right here, it goes from over here all the way to over there, all the way over here. It has been estimated to be 250 tons. This is the Wall of Crows in Egypt. I mean, stone blocks the size of railway cars. Then you have one of the sarcophagi at the Serapeum in Saqqara. There is some dude standing right there, cowered inside. The lid itself weighs about 6 tons. And now if you remember this, and I should have had this earlier, but if you remember this machining signature, the next slide I'm about to show you is from Egypt. Now, if that is not the remnant of a blade going through that rock, then, you know, I'm going to quit my job right now. I mean, look at this. And when I showed this to Roger Hopkins, he said it's unmistakable. Some type of a blade went through there, and not a chicken bone. Very famous Baalbek in Lebanon. This is a guy right here. Look at these stones. There's a guy right here. Look at these stones. This is in a site in Baalbek, Lebanon called Heliopolis. And yes, it was a Roman temple at the height of the Roman Empire. And yes, there are Roman columns there and Roman inscriptions and what have you. But the Romans themselves said that we are building on top of a way, way older structure that was not only known to the Greeks, but also to the Egyptians and, of course, to the Sumerians. And the whole idea that the place is called Heliopolis, City of the Sun, is only because, not only, but is exclusively because a long time ago, that was one place where allegedly the sun descended from the sky and interacted with mankind. Well, the sun doesn't do that, but some ET might. So this entire base, this right here, this to me is the crown. This takes everything. This stone starts over here, goes all the way over there. We don't even know where it ends. People have estimated that this rock alone, this corner rock, this slab, this platform, weighs over 1,750 tons. Our strongest cranes in the world peter out at 1,200 tons. Done. We can't lift anything heavier than 1,200 tons. But this was done with a pulley and strings. Yeah. Sure, right? And I'm just kind of breezing through this because I would like to answer questions, but I always finish my lectures with what I still think, even after 40 years of Chariots of the Gods, that it is one of the best pieces of evidence, one of the most clear pieces of evidence in regards to visits of extraterrestrials in the ancient past, and that is in Palenque, Mexico. At the Temple of the Inscriptions, there is a chamber underneath it, and I urge anyone of you to go there once in your lifetime, where when they first discovered this pyramid, they were of course looking forward to treasure, and in order to access this chamber that was in the ground, they had to not only go up there and free everything from the jungle, but at the same time, when they got at the very top here, at the entrance point, the stairs that go inside into the ground into the chamber here in the ground, this stairwell was completely filled with rubble. So painstakingly, stone by stone, rubble by rubble, they had to remove everything, and they finally stood in front of a door, and it was this triangular door, and they opened that as well. And then what they found right there was, and this is basically the way it looks. It's a bit misleading. This is not inside the pyramid. It's underneath the ground, and the pyramid was actually built on top of this chamber. So they had to come down, free everything, and there's the triangular door, and then they saw this incredible stone coffin with this incredible lid that looked like this. Oh, let's go back, sorry. And what they found there was the Palenque slab, which I'll show you later, looks amazing, and I'll tell you later why. But when they opened that triangular door, see, today we don't know how old that chamber is, because unfortunately, when they opened that door, all they saw was that sarcophagus, and they wanted to access it immediately for the treasure, or for the excitement. So instead of taking their time, because when they opened the door, the entire room was covered in stalactites and stalagmites. Meaning, stalactites and stalagmites, you can count or you can determine their age just like you can determine the age of a tree by not counting by counting the tree rings. And with the stalactites and stalagmites, you can determine the age by the thickness of these towers that they're hanging from the sky, from the ceiling, and connecting to at the bottom. And what did they do? They just took the crowbars with which they opened up the door and just started to hammer away at these stalactites and stalagmites, and thus forever and ever losing the opportunity to figure out or to determine how old this chamber is. I mean, it's really horrible what, in this case, because it would have been amazing to, find something and to show that, by the way, this is way older than what you think. So they found this incredible carving where it essentially shows this man, ruler Pakal, in a very interesting position, and his hands are manipulating some type of controls. There is some breathing apparatus in front of his nose. There's this really bizarre thing that he's holding on to this, to some levers. His foot is on some type of a pedal. At the very back, you see something as if a flame is coming out of it. I mean, it's all very technological looking, as if he is depicted in some type of a spaceship or some type of a vehicle, as some type of a shuttlecraft. He's wearing the tight overalls and things like that. And now, when archaeologists saw this for the very first time, and still today, this is the paradigm or the dogma that we have going on. This is King Pakal as he is being swallowed up by the underground monster. It's his journey to the underworld. And so what they're saying is that, this is the snake or the monster, and it's opening up its jaw, exposing one tooth here and one tooth over here. And he's being swallowed up, but don't despair. As he dies and he is swallowed up, a tree of life grows out of his belly, thus ensuring his survival. What the hell is a tree of life? It's a hollow phrase. It doesn't exist. It's something that we came up with in, behind closed doors, in university rooms, and things like this. I mean, it does not exist. This over here, of course, is the cut-off tail of a rattlesnake, and there is two. And what we think looks like an exhaust are the stylized beard hairs of a rat. Yeah, I totally see it. Now, interestingly enough, when Linda Sheely translated the band of hieroglyphics around this sarcophagus lid many, many years ago, she did actually say that, yes, that the hieroglyphics do say that this is King Pakal's journey to the underworld, Xibalba, which is the underworld in the Mayan language. But now I'm going to show you something else, and then I'm going to return to that thought, and I will tell you that she essentially retracted all of her research pertaining to the underworld a few months before she died. And I'm about to tell you what that is. But to me, what's interesting is that, you know, when you see this, obviously there's also, when you come in that chamber, this is where you come in, so you basically see it in this fashion, as in going up. And when I see something like this, people like me with a lot of fantasy and ideas, I go immediately to other places in the world, because that's the great thing about the ancient astronaut theory, that you can make or draw all these correlations between, or connections between other cultures. And when I see something like this, in this position, then immediately I see this bell or dome-shaped feature right up there. And I'm reminded of Indonesia. In fact, I'm reminded of Borobudur, which is one of the most sacred Buddhist sites in the world. And what we have here are these dome-shaped figures. They're called stupas. And inside each stupa, there is a Buddha. And a stupa translated into English, one of the translations is a chariot of the gods, or a chariot with which to reach the godly realm, or the realm of the gods, actually. And by the way, just so it's on the record, I am not saying, nor have I ever said, or would I ever suggest that Buddha was an extraterrestrial. Nonsense. Of course he was not an extraterrestrial. But we have all these stupas pointing to the sky, and then we have these stories about the stupas having been vehicles with which to reach the realm of the gods. And by the way, the realms of the gods were reached way before Buddha ever existed. I mean, the whole interaction between man and gods took place very far back. I mean, 2,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago, that's fairly quote-unquote young. We're talking long, long time ago. But when I see something like this, the bell-shaped figure, I mean the bell-shaped object, and you know the pointy thing up there, and having to do with the realm of the gods, well, we have that right here. And so my question is it possible that all around the world at pretty much the same time, people witnessed something like this? And I really think they did, because some of these beings were here. Oh, I forgot, the Linda Sheely thing. She retracted her knowledge or her research by saying the correct translation of Xibalba, underworld, is not the underworld, but the Milky Way. So, what we have there is a depiction of ruler Pakal on his journey, not to the underworld, but to the Milky Way. And then how much more easy can it get? So you have all these statues and questions about, you know, what was written or described in the Old Testament. It certainly wasn't God. It was a misunderstood extraterrestrial. I'm still a very deep believer in God. But my God is not a God of fear. And, you know, you do this or else, or by the way, while you're at it, go kill your own son. I mean, those are the ravings of a lunatic or of an extraterrestrial. So, the big question is, what were these creatures? Who were these beings? And, these angelic, quote-unquote, beings with the wings that we now call angels and things like, or actually not call them, but we've misinterpreted them into, they've been bastardized into angels and divine beings. Whether or not our entire system of belief is based on a complete misunderstanding. And if you want to know more, Season 3, Ancient Aliens, will come in a few months. And whatever you do, don't die wondering and always crack the code. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks. Thank you. All right. Let's do questions. Just coming up here. Or Dolores, would you like to say something? Or the mic is right here.
See what I meant? He is the real Indiana Jones.
Thank you.
They told me to leave the mic sitting right here, so if you want to line up for questions, come all the way up to this and speak directly into the mic.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, your show last year, you talked about Oak Island, and I don't know if you want to tell the story to if anyone hasn't heard about it, but I was just curious, is there any speculation on how old Oak Island is, or when it was constructed?
Oh, Oak Island. Okay, so the question was about Oak Island, and according to the things that I follow and Erich Von Daniken and some of my colleagues, we think that Oak Island is this place in Nova Scotia, Canada, that has what today is referred to as the money pit. And it's this place on this island where 150 years ago, some kids discovered this hole in the ground, and they thought, well, there's going to be treasure down there, and this is our way to our fortune and stuff like this. And they started to dig, and they never got anywhere. And here we are in 2011, and we still have not reached the bottom of that pit. That is why it's called the money pit, because not only have many people lost their life savings, but also many people have lost their lives. Now, we think that parts of the Ark of the Covenant, or at least the manna machine, is buried or hidden at that very bottom of that pit, because the flooding system that has been built in there is absolutely ingenious. And but for the question how old is Oak Island, or how old is that pit, nobody really knows, because when they performed some testing, the results that they got back were 1,000 years in the past and 1,000 years in the future. And that is quote-unquote impossible unless there is some type of a radioactive device that is messing around with the measuring instruments. And that's why we think some type of an extraterrestrial machine is located at that bottom. And by the way, just so you know, I know that after a while we'll have to leave this room, but you can, and please, come up to me. I'm going to be at the hotel bar. These maniacs have last call at 11 p.m. So let's make the best till 11. And apparently yesterday, I got to tell you this also. Yesterday, I walked in at 11:30, and I wanted to have another beer, and the lady said, "No, we're closed, and you can't have another beer. We had last call a half an hour ago." And I said, "Really?" And then I looked at the bar, and it was still filled with people, and I was like, "Okay, well, how come they have beer?" And well, they got their beer a half an hour ago, and I kid you not when I tell you right now that each person sitting at that bar had 5 beers in front of them. And then one guy was kind enough to share 1 beer with me, so that was very nice. Anyway, your question.
Alex Voltage, Paranormal, we're big fans of yours, have been for a long time.
Thanks.
Great lecture. I would like to know these aliens or extraterrestrials that brought us the civilization and everything, where you might think they went back to or why, and are these UFOs that we're seeing, are you think they're the same ones that came down?
I don't know. All I know is that we've never been alone. And yes, ancient aliens were here, but it's not like they disappeared and all of a sudden with Roswell it started up again. I mean, they were always here. Now, do I know where they went? I have no clue. Do I know if it's the same species that's here right now? I don't think so. I think just like there's many races on planet Earth, there's multiple races, thousands of races out there, and it's like everything that happens here on Earth goes on out there as well. I mean, I really do think it's kind of like Star Wars out there.
Do you think there are ruins on the moon? Have you delved into that at all, any, or
What on the moon? Ruins?
Ruins, yeah, ruins.
I've seen stuff. I mean, I've seen these. This one thing where it looks like kind of like a Nazca line on the moon. This rectangular long band, and it's interesting. But I'm not into that. It's
right.
I mean, is it there? Maybe. Is it not there? Maybe. I mean, look, to suggest that these things don't exist, that would be ridiculous. But I'm not an expert in it, and I don't know enough about it, but would I doubt it? Of course not.
Of course not. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for coming.
I know that in recent years, research, especially ancient astronaut research, has been incredibly hampered in Egypt from Egypt's government, and especially the Minister of Antiquities, Lahi Hawass. He is not a fan of ancient astronaut theory at all, and always tries to hamper any.
He calls us pyramidians.
Yes. And while he still is the Minister of Antiquities, the last I checked, do you think with the recent upheaval and a change of power in the government system that proponents of ancient astronaut theory are going to start being allowed access to artifacts and locations in Egypt again? And
We've always had access.
well, I mean, in the
You're gonna have
context that
cash,
you want-
baby. That's it. It's all about briberies over there.
And do you believe that there is a lot of evidence that possibly they are keeping out of the light?
No, not that I know of. I mean, look, is there something hidden away in a warehouse like in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Maybe, but I'm not worried about that because we're not going to have access to it anyway. So why speculate? I mean, I mean, my hair would be gray if I thought about stuff like that. I deal with the stuff that I have access to, stuff that I see, and everything else, who cares? We don't have access to it anyway. So why even, I mean, I've got plenty of stuff that I have access to. That's awesome. And, the whole idea about the pyramids thing, I mean, Zaya now has been in and out of that position twice now since the upheavals happened, and he won't last. It's over. He's done. What's really interesting is the fact that, there's an article online by Philip Coppens where he reveals that the entire schooling for Zaya Hawass, his university, and I think also his high school, was paid for by the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Now, you don't get your education paid for by the Edgar Cayce Foundation and then you do a complete 180. So something happened along the lines, and I mean, it's so fascinating, because people like me, but especially me, David Childress or Erich Von Daniken I don't know about Childress, but Erich Von Daniken and me, I have never said that the pyramids were built by aliens, and I never will say that, because the pyramids were built by us human beings. Big difference, or big with a big but, meaning the human beings, our ancestors, had assistance from the guardians of the sky. And the guardians of the sky, according to the ancient astronaut theory, were flesh and blood extraterrestrials. And imagine yourself, you go to a different planet one day and you want to leave behind a message that you were there. Are you going to log around stones? Are you going to build a structure? No. Because in their eyes, you are a god, even though you're just a regular Joe. But because you've descended from the sky, because you have access to machines that they think are magic, they will tell you, okay, where can we help you? And you have a workforce, and you teach them how to work these machines, and next thing you know, you have a pyramid. I mean, it's of course very simplified what I'm saying here, but it's pretty straightforward. So, for Zai Hawass something happened where he has completely done a 180, because, like I said, you can't have an education paid for by the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and then you become an asshole, like that. I've only said this now once because many people know that my lectures usually are peppered with profanities, but because I'm in the lovely state of Arkansas and I know it's not proper here, I've restrained myself. So if you don't hear me talk, come and have a beer with me. So anyway.
I had one follow-up. Have you seen recently that they are actually using satellite technology to find buried pyramids in Egypt? And
oh, yes. That just came out recently. I mean, that is stuff that we've talked about, not we, but Erich Von Daniken talked about this in the 70s, that the entire Giza Plateau, well, first of all, that there are other pyramids, but for example, that the entire Giza Plateau is riddled with an underground tunnel system. He wrote about that in the 70s, and it was about a year ago or a year and a half ago where that tunnel system now has been announced to actually exist. Now, that was 30 years ago that he wrote about it. What happened in those 30 years? Were they explored, or did they only start to explore now? Well, you know what the answer is. They are now announcing it because everything that was found in there was put into that warehouse with the crates.
Thank you.
Giorgio, thank you for your program.
Oh.
There was a question that I have, listening to everything you were saying, that I've been very interested in and you didn't touch on, and that was, how were these big metallithic stones moved?
Yep.
There was an article, most of us have probably seen it here on the History Channel, of the gentleman in Florida that moved them in the dark.
Yes.
And they were talking about being Nikola Tesla's technology. Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. I really do think that most of these stones, if not all, the big ones, were moved by some type of levitation. Levitation, though, not by chanting or by mental powers, but by machines, by some type of sophisticated technology that, we haven't discovered yet, with some type of sound waves, because we're all vibration. Everything vibrates. It doesn't matter if it's a human being or a piece of rock. It's all the same. And everything at the core vibrates. And if you can manipulate that vibration, it is possible, and we know this today in the lab, that we can make light items. We can make them levitate. I mean, it's done with sound waves. And so if we can somehow reach into the object and, manipulate the consistency of that object with vibration or harmonics, then this stuff is possible. And we have references about that In, for example, an ancient Egyptian text, it says that in order to move some of these blocks, they had access to this white paper-like substance that they would put on the rock, and then they would speak magical words, incantations. And then all of a sudden that block moved, or actually it floated into place. Now, was it really magical paper? Was it really magical words that were spoken for the incantations? No, magic does not exist. I mean, it exists in a way where, falling in love, hanging out with friends, having a good time, that's magic. But Harry Potter magic with the wand doesn't exist. But if you have technology that to technologically primitive people that they witness, then to them that is magic. Arthur C. Clarke, he really said it best. He said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I mean, if you have your iPhone or your iPad here, show that to your great-great-grandmother, or your grandmother even, or great-grandmother. I mean, this is magic. I mean, I just know that if I were to show this to my great-grandmother, she wouldn't, I mean, she would love it, but at the same time, it would completely over her head. So that is exactly what we have here, that, these stones were never moved by magic. They were moved by machines, by machinery or tools, but our ancestors misinterpreted that also the people who had access to these tools, that they were magicians, that they were, these divine beings, which they never were. They were, not that the divine realm does not exist. See, I'm not even saying that, of course, but that's a whole other topic that has absolutely nothing to do with what I do. So, there was definitely, like I said at the very end, it's a big misunderstanding. So does that answer your question?
It does, except for the machines that you were referring to, because the man in Florida had some kind of simple sticks that pointed in the air that maybe they were just helping these rocks move, while he was using, they were saying, I believe, zero-point energy, which was a Tesla technology.
Right. And what's also very interesting is that, yes, you're right, he only worked at night, and there are eyewitnesses reports where sometimes at night there will be a strange green light emanating from Coral Castle. And what's also funny is that Coral Castle, where it stands today, is not in its original position. So Coral Castle has been moved once. And Leedskalnin hired a trucking company to move the rocks from point A to point B, but he always told the truck drivers, you put the truck right here, now you go have lunch.
And he moved them.
An hour later,
Right.
the guy came back, and the stone was on top of the truck, of the flatbed. The truck driver would bring the stone to the new location. Leedskalnin would say, now you go have dinner.
Right.
And he would come back an hour later. And of course, I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
But the gist of the story is that he never showed people how he moved those stones. And he was a wee man.
A
like
little
this.
small man, yes.
So,
Well, thank you very much.
oh, you're welcome.
I think we're living in human history's most interesting times.
Yes.
Known history, that is. What I'm here tonight is to explain a little bit about, you had showed an image of a terracotta mask, helmeted
Yes.
image on your screen earlier. When I was in Alaska back in 2003, 2005, I entered into a community called Deering. They had an archaeological dig site there. It was because they were putting through a water system through the town, which is an ancient area anyway, and it's known for its archaeological sites, but this is the first time that they uncovered an archaeological site called the Ipiutak people. They had uncovered the very best example of a helmeted alien-type image, just exactly like the one on your screen,
Do you have a
except
picture?
that it had animistic designs,
Do you have a
typical of
picture?
that.
Do you have a picture?
I'm going to download those and send them to you.
Yeah, please do
There
that.
have been 3 known found in the Ipiutak horizon up above the on the Seward Peninsula region straight up to the Point Hope area south of Barrow. And it's an unknown, very mystic, very mysterious group of Eskimos or Inuit of that time frame archaeologically that archaeologists really don't have much of a handle on. We're looking at St. Lawrence Island and its extreme amount of ivory work that was carved prehistoric all through that region. A lot of them are spaceships, and they've called them winged objects. And if you look at them closely, like you pointed out earlier, they are elements of vehicles, jet engines attached. And they hooked them onto the back of their harpoons and threw them at whales and walruses in their attempts to bring on the God image and bring on the luck idea so that they could continue in a success platform in their belief system. I will get you all these images to add to your collection. I've been looking at their doll forms, their human forms, all through the years. 3,000 years old this stuff is. And none of them look human. They're elliptical heads, similar to the alien type prototype gray types, if you will.
Wow.
And they're reproduced in ivory. And
That's
they're
amazing.
ancient. And they extend clear over to Siberia. So this whole region is hundreds of miles across with very similar, images. So this is something I would like to share with you in the future.
Thanks.
And I will. So I'll get your card and have
Yes,
a beer with you, too.
absolutely.
I'm actually very curious to know what got you started on studying everything that you do, and what you first started studying and everything.
My grandma.
Really?
Yeah, growing up in my household, I grew up in a very Catholic household, but it was still, it wasn't looked down upon to talk about various topics. But my grandma, whenever she would visit with my grandpa, she would always talk about ghosts and the spiritual realm and Atlantis, and of course, naturally also about extraterrestrials. So I had the great privilege of traveling around the world with my parents growing up. And, my parents were very adamant that whenever we were somewhere to go and visit the museums or to go to archaeological digs and monuments and stuff and check it out and, have like a guided tour of those places. But whenever I would come back home, my grandmother would say, okay, so now you've just learned about the mainstream views of that particular culture or ancient culture, but let me show you something else, what other thinkers have proposed about those cultures. And so at a very young age, she would introduce me to Erich Von Daniken and to all the other authors that have been writing in that realm since the 60s and 70s. And I think we're all a product of our upbringing. So, I've seen a lot of young people here and even young people here with their grandmothers and great-grandmothers, so you're doing a fantastic job. That's great. So thanks to your mom that you're here too. That's fantastic. But yeah, so that's, but of course, I grew up, I'm a child of the late 70s, early 80s, so Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all of that, that's all very influential. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming. Paxton.
I feel like possibly a lot of the conclusive evidence that could lead to more of, the people who don't necessarily subscribe to this view, it could provide as more conclusive evidence to not really leaving them a choice. I feel as though there is this information that exists. People have found it, but it's been suppressed. And what do you think that we can do as obviously supporting you as a community here? What can we all do to, put people into a position to where you have to give credence to this theory and really, give some serious recognition to it? Right. No, just talk to your friends about it. And when they say, well, all that stuff has been debunked, that's when you turn on the TV and show them Ancient Aliens, or you show them a pin like this, and you say, okay, or you show them a picture of the 1,750-ton block in Baalbek, and you say, okay, so mainstream archaeologists say that this was moved with ropes and pulleys, and guys, do you know
that our cranes today, they peter out at 1,200 tons. And look, let me tell you right now, don't waste your time with people who after that will tell you, but it's still wrong, they debunked it. You're not going to win with those people. You're not. You're just going to waste your time. You're going to get frustrated, and you know, so don't worry. I mean, talk to people that want to listen, because in the end, it's the people that want to listen with the open mind. The ones that don't listen, they're already dead. There's nothing you can do about them. True.
Thank you.
Yeah, Giorgio, I want to ask you, I don't know if you know this man or not. I've been trying to remember his name, and I don't know if Julie would remember or not. I've met him at many conferences, and I believe him. He has discovered something, I think it's in Yugoslavia.
Oh, the Bosnian pyramid?
No, he's an American.
Oh, okay.
But he found this thing, and it's highly secret, and it's way in the middle of nowhere. And the story was that during World War II, some people took refuge in this tunnel. It was a cave with a tunnel, and they went way back in there. They stayed in there when the bombings and all that was going on. And inside this mountain, this huge spacecraft. And the mountain has developed around the spacecraft. And he's trying to find some way to get into it. He sees like there could be openings.
Yeah.
And he keeps going back, and it's highly dangerous because it's way back in the middle of nowhere. He can't take any guide. Nobody but anybody know where it is. And there's snakes. He said it's very highly dangerous. But I've talked to him so many times, and he showed me pictures. But do you imagine how old that would be if the spacecraft was there? It's huge, and he can just see a portion of it because the mountain has built itself around the spacecraft.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've never heard of this.
Well,
yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name, but I know him very well, and I've seen him at many conferences.
Okay.
But he is trying to keep it secret, and he's trying to get the money to be able to go in there and...
The secret is out. The secret is out.
Well, he wouldn't even tell us exactly.
Sorry, Dolores, the secret is out.
Well, he has talked about it at some conferences, but he won't say exactly where it is.
Oh, okay.
Because he doesn't want anybody else going in there.
Except for us. I'm going to plane there tomorrow.
So there's still a lot of mysteries, but you can imagine how old that would be.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, if a mountain formed over it, that's
Okay,
pretty amazing.
So there's a lot of mysteries out there nobody can explain.
Oh, yeah.
So you got like your work cut out for you. You got a lot more to do. You can learn the QHHT process by coming to one of the classes. The problem is I have stopped taking the long trips. I was doing many, many trips a year to all the countries of the world. These were long 14, 16-hour flights, and we were having 100 people in each class in all these different countries. But it began to take a toll on me that I don't want to be traveling that much out of the country anymore. We were still doing classes in the United States too, but we decided I would no longer take the long trips out of the country. So we're only doing one live class a year in America. So we're going to do one a year in America. And we have advanced classes that are available. We're still doing those all over the world. But if you want to take the class and you can't do it live anymore, the class is available online. It was a filming of an actual class that I did. And you're getting the same instructions that you would if you were sitting in the class. The only difference is you're not there to ask questions. But all the students ask lots of questions, and we always say everything you'd want to know has already been asked anyway. So online you will get the same instruction as you would in a class. And that's available. And many people are taking that now. And we now have this class translated into Chinese and Spanish. This is going to be available for those people in those countries to take the class in their own language. And we're also putting it into other languages. So it's growing, and this is another way to do it if you can't come to a live class. But I have to, well, the ones I work with, they said, let technology take over. Then rather than me traveling all over the world, let technology take over. You have the equipment, use it. So we'll see how this is working out. The online class is doing very well. You contact DoloresCannon.com. I encourage anyone interested in quantum healing hypnosis to please take advantage of the training that is now available online. You can find it through my website, DoloresCannon.com.